Yesterday was good news. It was good news on behalf of the passage of S. 744, the Comprehensive Immigration Reform Bill. This is good news that the Senate is on the verge of being able to act on this legislation. 11 million people who live in the shadows, they will now have hope that they will be able to stay here in America and work in America and one day become citizens of this great country. But the real winners of immigration reform are the American people and our government. We have a broken immigration system today, and this bill will allow us to replace that broken immigration system with a balanced approach on how to deal with immigration in this country. It's balanced by first recognizing border security is important. We have to make sure that people come into this country lawfully, come in through a door, not over a fence. And this bill clearly deals with the issues of border security. It also deals with E-Verify for employers to make sure employers only hire those who are legally present in this country. And it also provides a way in which those who are currently here can come out of the shadows, get legal status, and earn the pathway to citizenship. I say earn a pathway to citizenship because those individuals have to comply with our laws, pay our taxes, learn English, and then, Mr. President, wait for the entire work backlog within the immigration system to be cured before they can apply for citizenship. So it's a way in which individuals who are currently here, who are law-abiding, who are prepared to comply with our laws, have a reasonable pathway to citizenship. It also deals with realistic numbers for people who want to come to America, who want to make America their home, family reunifications, as well as those who want to work in this country by having reasonable numbers so that we can get the skilled workers we need, we can get the seasonal workers we need. And it replaces a badly broken immigration system. And as I mentioned to Senator Durbin, it includes the DREAM Act. So children who have been here most of their lives, within a relatively short period of time, have a pathway to citizenship here in America. Mr. President, I regret that the border surge modifications were added to this legislation. I do that for many reasons. I thought the bill reported out by the Judiciary Committee, although it was not the bill that I would have written, was well balanced on border protection. I think the additions that will be added later today will spend a lot of money with little results for the taxpayers of this country. I think we've thrown money at a problem rather than trying to look at what should be done in the most cost-effective way. The cost benefits of these billions of dollars that are being spent, to me, are very marginal. Most of the problems deal with employment. The E-Verify system, I think, is an important improvement in the bill, as reported out by the Judiciary Committee. And when we look at who is likely in the future to be illegal in this country, it's more likely to be people who entered the country lawfully and then are out of status than it is someone sneaking over the border. So I think we could have used the money in a much more effective way, and we are micromanaging border security, which in the long run will not be in the benefit of this country. I couldn't agree with Senator Leahy more in the statement that he gave. We are waiving contractor rules by the amendment that is currently on the floor, and that's going to cause waste, fraud, and abuse. There's no question in my mind about that. And what I find really hypocritical is that the same senators who are on the floor day after day complaining about the size of government and government spending when it comes to educating our children, when it comes to dealing with our most vulnerable, when it comes to dealing with our healthcare system, are the ones who propose spending more money on border security than anyone thought was necessary. So to me, we could have done this better, and I am disappointed. And I think if you take a look at it, the amount of money that's being spent here exceeds any of the earmark funds that we were complained of wasting in the past. I thought there was some benefit to earmarks, and we talked about that. We got rid of earmarks, and now we have a bill that's spending billions of dollars in an effort to deal with border security when we could have done it in a much more cost-effective way. I'm also disappointed by the amendment process that has been used in this legislation. I don't blame the majority leader at all. What I do is blame those who have been obstructionists in considering amendments on the floor. Republicans have complained about amendments being offered on the floor of the Senate in the past when given the opportunity on this immigration bill for us to consider amendments, it was the same Republicans who objected to us considering the bill. Senator Leahy offered a group of non-controversial amendments. Mr. President, it was a large group. Senator Landrieu has talked about this frequently. She offered her amendment to deal with children. In that group of non-controversial amendments was an amendment that I offered. I still hope we'll have a chance to deal with this, the Rush Act. Now, what does that deal with? That's Amendment 1286, bipartisan. Please, Senator Kirk, Senator Portman have joined me in co-sponsoring this bill. This amendment, it deals with Holocaust survivors, some of our most vulnerable citizens. On average, they are over 80 years of age. Many live alone. Many live below the federal poverty level. And they are desperately concerned about being institutionalized, as I think everyone here can understand. This amendment makes it easier for them to access services under the Older Americans Act. Non-controversial, was before us, objected by a Republican why we couldn't offer that series of amendments. That's not what we should be doing. We should be considering these amendments in the orderly way. That was not allowed. Let me mention one other amendment that I hope we'll get a chance to consider, S. 1469, offered by Senator McCain, and I've joined Senator McCain on this. It deals with gross violations of human rights, internationally recognized human rights. Someone who has violated the basic international standards for human rights shouldn't be given a visa to come here to America. We took action last Congress dealing with the Magnitsky circumstances in Russia, denying gross human rights violators in Russia the opportunity of coming to America and getting a visa. At that time, we talked about that should be an international standard. Senator McCain and I have led the charge on this, with other senators. I want to thank Senator Wicker for his work on these issues. We should now have the opportunity. It's non-controversial. No one's raised an objection to it. Should be considered. And yet, because of the obstructionist policies, to date, we have not had that opportunity. I want to mention a few other issues that are in the underlying bill that I think we could improve upon if we had the opportunity to consider reasonable amendments. One deals with profiling. I've introduced legislation that would ban profiling. When law enforcement profiles based upon race, religion, national origin, or ethnicity, it's bad police policy. It's bad law enforcement policy. It leads to sloppy work. It leads to waste of resources. And resources are very scarce. And it causes a community to turn against working with law enforcement rather than working with law enforcement. All of us have said we want to get rid of racial profiling. And yet this bill does provide a statement against profiling. But it is not as strong as it should be, and there's some unintended consequences as a result of the language that's included in it. I think this is very appropriate. I'm talking about this today as the Trayvon Martin case starts in our courts, the youngster who, as a result of racial profiling, lost his life. I've introduced an amendment, 1267, which would add to the basic bill against profiling based upon religion or national origin, and would remove a broad exception to the bill that is included here that's well-intended, but I think really compromises the purpose of the underlying bill, which is to prevent profiling. I've also offered Amendment 1266, which deals with additional security scrutiny given and screening given to certain individuals. The underlying bill says it can be done by country or region. Well, that's profiling. If we have specific information, let's use specific information. Otherwise, again, we're going to be wasting the resources of our security system. The best use of resources would have us have information that we use for additional screening rather than just saying from one region or one country. And by the way, if you can get a visa from those countries, then there's obviously a reason for you to be here. Unless you have a specific reason for additional screening, we shouldn't be doing that by region or country. The two amendments I refer to are supported by many, many groups. They're supported by the Leadership Council on Civil and Human Rights, by the NAACP, by the ACLU, and I can mention other groups that have urged us to modify the underlying bill with these changes. I held several town hall meetings in Maryland on the immigration reform bill. They were well attended. I thought the discussions were very positive. They were focused on how we can make this bill a better bill and eliminate some of the unintended consequences. Several at these town hall meetings talked about the registered provisional immigrant status and certain requirements in order to stay in that status and have a pathway to citizenship. One is you have to be regularly employed. We understand that. That's a good requirement. However, there are times when you have to understand that may not be practical. During an economic downturn, when someone's in school, the bill recognizes that school is an acceptable, education is an acceptable substitute for regular employment. But if you're unemployed for a 60-day period, you run the risk of losing your legal status in this country. I offered an amendment that said volunteering and community service would be an acceptable substitute. Now, this is a win-win situation. Someone who volunteers, helping our community, also learning more about the needs of our community. This has the support of the AFL-CIO. They understand the reasonableness of our labor circumstances. And I would have hoped that we've had a chance, and I hope still we'll have a chance, to consider that modification. I also was in discussions dealing with, that came out of these town hall meetings, those who have violated our laws perhaps many years ago, maybe not a very serious issue. There should be at least some flexibility in the law for extenuating circumstances so someone's not jeopardized to be deported because of something that is not really relevant to today, that person be law-abiding. I would hope we could consider that. I offered Amendment 1264, which deals with private prisons. I think our colleagues were surprised to find out that ICE detentions, about 14,000, about half are detained in private penal facilities, not federal facilities. Now, we want accountability. This law provides for accountability for those who are detained. But a FOIA application where you can get information only applies to federal prisons. It doesn't apply to the non-federal prisons. Well, I offered an amendment, a common sense amendment, I don't think it's controversial, that would apply the same oversight to non-federal prisons, to private prisons, as we do to federal prisons. We all talk about accountability and responsibility of accountability. I think that amendment makes abundant sense. So as you can see, this is not the bill I would have drafted. I would have done other things. I would have spent money a little bit differently than it's spent here, certainly not as much money. I would have taken care of some of the problems on profiling, so certainly would have done with the Holocaust survivors, some of the other issues. And I still have hope that some of these amendments can be considered and adopted. I know people are working on that, and I hope we can work on a package that will improve the bill, particularly the non-controversial amendments. I spoke on the floor a couple weeks ago as to why I supported this bill. I talked about a high school student who found out he was eligible for a scholarship only to find out he couldn't take it because of his legal status. I talked about young people who are separated from their parents who have been deported. I've talked about employers who have workers that are well-trained, seasonal needs, highly skilled needs, scientists who are desperate for immigration reform so that they can meet their economic needs. I've talked at great length how this bill will help the American economy, help us be more competitive internationally, and how this bill is compassionate as to what America should stand for on its immigration policies. So, Mr. President, this is not a difficult choice for me to make. I support this legislation and will be voting for this legislation because I do think it's in the best interest of our country. I do hope we have an opportunity to improve this legislation before we vote on it. I hope we can adopt some of these non-controversial amendments, but I do hope that we will send this bill to the House of Representatives. I urge my colleagues in the House to follow the example of the Senate, to listen to each other, work across party line, so that we can pass comprehensive immigration reform, send it to the President of the United States for his signature.